So thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Philip Dunn, and I'm very pleased and proud to have been appointed chairman of the business substantively last week, in circumstances that, of course, none of us would have wished for. Nigel, my predecessor, Nigel McNair Scott, obviously passed away very suddenly, very tragically. He was such an important figure in this business, and I know many of you here will have known him personally, and I'm particularly pleased that Anna and I think we'll have all three of the boys, but there are four of the boys, there are three in the room at the moment, have joined us today. And I hope I can speak for you, certainly for David, who's on the board, that the family's commitment to the company remains robust. So thank you for joining us today, Anna. So we're now going to sort of move into a fairly formal presentation. And I'd just like to take a few minutes at the beginning just to set a little bit of context and a bit of the scene of where the company is today compared to when we last met, for those of you who came to Farnborough last year. And I think it's fair to say that it has not been quite as smooth a ride as we had hoped a year ago. We have gone through, we've suffered a number of primarily timing setbacks in the way in which things have or have not been delivered according to our expectation. And as a consequence of that, we have looked very carefully at the strategy of the company. And we had an important day last month. But some of these things have happened by design, and some of them not within our control. So we've made some changes to the board. I have been on the board for 2 years. I have a background in investment banking before I became a politician, and don't all groan, but I am a member of Parliament, but not for much longer. I've said I'm going to step down, which is why I'm able to take on this role. While a member of Parliament, I served in the Ministry of Defence for 4 years, from 2012 to 16, and was in that job involved in defence procurement. And it was through that I met Nigel and got to know the company. I've been on the board for 2 years and therefore got to know the company better. What we have done in addition to my appointment is we've had a refresh of our non-exec representation from BAE Systems, and David Holmes, who's with us, has taken over from Ian Mulroney. And we've also had, we've welcomed a new non-exec to the board in the form of Samir Zouadi from SDF, who represents one of our now 2 government shareholders. Since we last met, we've had an investment in the company by SDF, which is one of the United Arab Emirates sovereign wealth funds. They're represented on the board by Sama, and they have an observer, Andrew Blaxland, who's in the room today. And Andrea Minton-Beddoes had joined the board before we last met a year ago, but only just before. So we've got some new and vigorous non-execs on the board. And at the executive level, we have been joined by Chris Thorold, who's the CFO, who took over from Tom Scrope, who left towards the end of last year. And Chris will be speaking shortly. And we've also added to the executive leadership team in the shape of our business development, our strategy director, Nick Cranner, who's over here, who's joined us on Monday last week from BAE Systems. We've got Mike Whitehead, who's joined as a production director from Rolls-Royce. And we have other senior people who've joined, but not at the executive leadership team level. So we've got a more focused group of people in the company to try and drive through the strategy. Now, the strategy has shifted, and I'd mentioned extraneous events. So the UK Space Agency, as many of you will know, were the primary funder behind the company, having provided a £60 million grant now close to 8 years ago to develop the Sabre engine. The UK Space Agency, in the last year or so, when that contract came to its natural end and successful end, we passed all the milestones, have gone through 1 or 2 iterations of their own. and have not at this point decided to move that project forward at the same kind of scale. There are continuing space opportunities for us, but the Space Agency is going through its own refresh, if you like, and that may or may not have something to do with the changes in administration of the government in the last 12 months. I won't comment on that. But we've had to shift, that's better, thank you, shift our emphasis to take advantage of the technologies that we've developed through the space program, and that's driving us into hypersonics, which is one of the most exciting areas of high-end engineering anywhere in the world at the moment, and we are right at the core of the UK initiative in hypersonics, which Mark will be talking about shortly. We've also looked at how we focus the company with the myriad of opportunities that we've got down to what are the defining characteristics of the business that you've all invested in. And we will go on to explain through the presentation that we've sought to define those as a focus on security, and hypersonics and defence sits within that, and sustainability, where we've identified other aerospace opportunities in civil and net zero aviation, automotive, where we have the product in Formula One cars at the moment, and in energy, where we see huge opportunities in managing heat from energy industrial processes. And so that's how we are looking at driving the business. At its core, it's about thermal management, providing a more efficient, to create using heat in a more efficient way, which allows us to shrink the size of the capability that delivers it, which makes it both smaller and lighter and cooler. And if you go away from this presentation today thinking of those three things, I think you will have the core of reaction engines as it is today lodged in your mind. So with that brief introduction, I'm going to hand you over to the Chief Executive, Mark Thomas.
Hi everyone, nice to see you again. It doesn't feel a year ago that we last saw each other in Farnborough, but that was a great event as well. Farnborough next year, so watch that space, because I hope we'll be there with a few more products on display. So I'm going to give you a pick up on the thread that Philip was developing there, particularly talk about how we're looking at and approaching the markets with our products and capabilities and where that may take us. So a good place to start was on this security and sustainability axis. So really quite balanced in terms of the business across these two major themes of security and sustainability. World of opportunity in both areas. Philip's mentioned a number of examples already, and there's some outside that you've been hopefully poring over and talking to the team about. Front and centre now is really the hypersonics opportunity, and that's evolved from our Sabre offering. So without Sabre, we wouldn't be a contender for hypersonics, but hypersonics is really a strategic imperative, and we're extremely well positioned, and I just think extremely proud to be leading a UK programme that is very significant and is associated with the Royal Air Force, with some fantastic industry partners and sponsors. I'll touch that a bit later, and if you saw the Times newspaper over the weekend, there was a piece that we were referenced in talking about the kind of resurgence of high speed. Defence, there are other opportunities in defence, reinforced really RIAT, the Royal International Air Tattoo this weekend, where I was happy to walk down all of the sponsor chalets and confirm that we have a relationship to every single one of those companies, every single aerospace and defence prime company. We have a close relationship to, if not working together already on opportunities and contracts. Sustainability is extremely big spectrum of opportunity, and it's a huge passion of the business and imperative for the business. And we see, you've seen hopefully our challenges and our targets outside, but we are an enabler for net zero aviation. We have an award-winning capability. We've been recognised for our efforts there already, but more significantly, people can see what we're positioning for and how we're going to help to solve that global imperative and challenge for humanity. Automotive, as Philip said, very well placed in Formula One. Been racing now for two seasons, very successfully, with a multi actually award-winning motorsport product, and we'll be expanding into further teams and opportunities next year. And then energy is a strategic opportunity. With the energy transition, with the need to look for cleaner sources of energy and to go and improve industrial operations and oil and gas operations with our technology, a scale up of the Sabre technology that we've developed around cooling systems, and neatly positioned for our work with our most recent strategic investor, SDF in UAE, where there's certainly a huge interest there, and COP28 being hosted in Dubai this year is a showcase opportunity for us as a business. So firstly, I just want to lodge this security, sustainability in these 5 sectors, because I sort of developed from that. Same format, just the other way around. Security, sustainability, and then the 5 sectors. Really what we're trying to emphasize here, there's a lot of detail on this slide, and it's one I'm happy for you to come and pore over if there's interest later and talk about. The security work that's basically our ability to lead complex programs involving high-end technology development and rapid experimentation to get capability fielded as quickly as possible. We are really good at that stuff. I mean, let me just say we are really good. We've done, on the hypersonics project in the UK, we've done 2 successful engine tests this year, first half of this year. And we're rapidly moving into a third experiment in the coming months. So we are very, very good at that experimental testing campaigns, R&D in a rapid manner, and that's all born out of our Sabre legacy. That's what we learned through doing the Sabre program. That was a very challenging undertaking, but we were able to engineer those skills and capabilities through that experience. The right-hand side, which is on the sustainability challenge and opportunity, it's much more about us offering products up to the marketplace. So we have complex programs, experimentation, and on the other side of the business, rapid product development, that meets the customer requirements, that's able to go into fielded systems to deliver an upgrade capability, more efficiency, more power for less heat, or to go into emerging markets, enable emerging markets, carbon capture being a good example. So we're pretty unique as a business in having all of these capabilities under one house, and operate this way both in the UK and the US, and increasingly in more international domains. It is very difficult to keep this in balance, and obviously your investment has enabled us to get to this point. But all of these things lead to more contracts and more revenue and a return to shareholders. So we do actually, we're highly confident that we're on the right path here, and it's this unique blend that's given us the opportunities that we see as a business. On the hypersonic side, this is the flagship project that you've hopefully heard about. We launched at Farnborough last year, has been publicised to a degree, what we're allowed to say publicly. So it's a reusable hypersonic platform enabled by our technology. And the unique feature here, in amongst all of these fantastic partner and sponsor and customer names, is that Reaction Engines is leading the entire project. So, the engine and the vehicle. So that is a big undertaking, a big privilege, and we're dictating the pace of that project, and we're moving rapidly through these series of experiments to get that system flying. I mean, that's the objective. Let's get flying as quickly as possible and see what we learn from that experience. But brilliant that we've been able to bring this team together, including Rolls-Royce and the RAF, DSTL, and our funding agencies. And if we can do hypersonic flight, then we can get to space. So that's the message with this slide. It's a further extension of that capability to deliver a payload to orbit. So we're not taking the direct path to a launch system, but the indirect path through a hypersonic platform makes complete sense to me and the people that are supporting our business. And we see that at the right point in time, this is a place we will land as a company. As Philip said, the last year or two has been very challenging on the space funding front, but I think with this new roadmap, then we're much more. We have a very compelling offering, and we're very relevant to future needs. and that's about responsive space access. If I just trip through these different sectors with a sustainability focus, aerospace is very lively at the moment. We see a world of opportunity. We're probably best known as an aerospace technology business on our closest relationships, so with aerospace companies at all levels in the food chain. But for us, the real drive is to enable more sustainable aviation, particularly zero emissions aviation. So moving from kerosene-based products that generate pollution to hydrogen fuel cells, hydrogen-fueled aircraft that deliver a clean operation. And the entire industry is shifting in that direction. So we're not alone in thinking that we need to be doing this. There's an entire industry shift. We're very well positioned on the fuel cell powered aircraft. So taking an engine off an aircraft, replacing it with a fuel cell power pack, that delivers as much heat to the aircraft as it does usable energy, and we've got the capability to manage that heat to make it not a problem for the aircraft, for the passengers, for the operator, and to enable you to carry a payload. So that one in the centre there, Project Fresson, working with Cranfield Aerospace to re-engineer an existing platform to introduce fuel cell power plants to prove out that capability on a passenger carrying aircraft. So the intent is to get that flying again as quickly as possible. It will fly next year. Hopefully it will fly at Farnborough next year, so definitely encourage you to be there when that happens. And what that's given us is access to other players in that sector. So we're now actively engaged with other companies developing those similar products. We have multiple other contracts in this area. Some are small, some are larger, some are precursors to very big opportunities. But it's really all foundational, foundational on our cooling technology, which I'll emphasise again has come out of the Sabre engine. So it's proven to be extremely versatile in these other applications. So sustainable aviation, there's a product focus, but we're also involved in some really big partnerships at the moment. So we are a technology partner of choice for some of the biggest companies in the world in the aerospace sector, working, for example, on hydrogen-fueled gas turbines with Rolls-Royce and hydrogen-enabled aircraft with the likes of Airbus and others. So hydrogen is a really strategic shift as well, and we want to be ready for that market when it needs to be served. And these pioneering R&D programs that are funded by organisations like the Aerospace Technology Institute and the European Union through the Horizon programme, Innovate UK. These are extremely helpful vehicles for getting capability to a point where it can be taken to market without the company having to invest all of its own resources in some of these high-end research activities. But these are great things to be part of in terms of technology development, but also being part of getting closer to some of our future customers and partners. Motorsport and automotive, we delivered out of the box, literally out of the box, a multi-award winning intercooler for the Formula One sector that's been racing happily now for 2 seasons across 3 Formula One teams, with another team now signed up for next year. We've just signed the contract, in fact, this morning, is that right, Chris? For next year's deliveries, and this is a not insignificant amount of money, I should say. It's a great business to be in. Early technology adopters obviously want the latest and greatest technology, proving out our technology not just for Formula One and wider motorsport, but for multiple other sectors. And they really do, as you can hopefully see from that picture, abuse these things that we've delivered to them. I think the record at the moment is our intercoolers have survived a 60G crash, so 60 times the force of gravity crash. They're pretty robust products, but they're exquisite as well, I should say. They're beautiful to look at. Probably will find themselves in the design museum at some point as well, but they are fantastic. There's just a fantastic business to step into, and it's given us lots of excitement and further opportunity. Now, watch Formula One carefully, but you don't have to watch Formula One. I'm a big fan, but if you are, but in 2026 there's going to be a really big change to the rules, and that opens up much more of the car to our technology. So we're doing extremely well at the moment. We're building on that. In 2026 is really all to play for, and we're working hard to make sure we are the technology of choice across much more of the car, and then moving into Le Mans and other forms of racing beyond that. So. Energy, it says industrial waste heat recovery. That's the major opportunity in the energy sector, taking our cooling technology to capture heat that would be exhausted to the atmosphere in the form of a pollutant or just waste, and converting that into usable energy. Technology fits brilliantly. It is a scale up, quite a significant scale up of the technology. Will be done through partnership, and truly hope that the first opportunity will be out in the UAE with our strategic partner SDF. Very strategic business sector rather. New one for us, but we do have similar products that we put out for trials, and they've proven to be very successful. So, and just, you can't quite see in the picture at the bottom there, but there's obviously if you can see it, by the way, there's a factory or energy plant. There's a sticking out to the right of that. There's a big stack and a chimney. That is the cooling arrangement on today's factories. It is almost as big as the factory. Right down in the bottom of that picture, there's a red thing. That's an articulated lorry. Sitting on top of the red thing is our cooler. So it's like a 20 times scale reduction to what's in the factory today or on the site today. So it's hugely powerful in terms of what it can unleash around new facility design, infrastructure footprint, but also easily a drop-in solution for an existing facility. So yeah, definitely one to have a closer look at if you can't see that. There's a big focus on sustainability I've mentioned already. As a business, we've signed up to aggressive targets, objectives. They've been rolled out across the whole company. It's generated a lot of enthusiasm, excitement, passion, high levels of motivation. There's targets around our products, our cleaning up our operations, but also individual actions that we've all committed to take to make sure that we stay on the right path and we do what we need to do for the planet and humanity. And I should say it makes good business sense as well, because this is an area that's attracting significant amounts of investment, and we do have an enabling capability. So we are very serious about that, and just this year we've done a number of things, rolling out, say, the strategy, the targets, overhauling our recycling and use of resources across the business, working with our site landlords or owners to see how we're going to upgrade our buildings with solar panels, and making sure that we conform to latest standards so that we're ahead of the curve in terms of what we need to do to be efficient and green with our operations, and working with our team in the US that has a high-end test capability to make sure we're testing as efficiently as possible and making sure that we're true to our word in terms of our sustainability mission. So there's lots there. And then just finally from me, we've been really busy as a team externally. So I know there's some people in the room who avidly follow our social media. Thank you very much. Some of our strongest supporters and allies. But we've been very active on social media platforms at events and conferences this year. So there's lots of news stories out there. If you are struggling to find them, then we can absolutely make sure you get those in a more accessible form. Just last week, we won Technology Company of the Year for the Thames Valley. Okay, so I caveat Thames Valley, but that is a big number of tech companies, and we had some fierce competition. So Tech Company of the Year is a big award, and it's going in the awards cabinet, and we've won multiple other awards in the last 2 years. Sustainability Tech Company of the Year, Motorsport Product of the Year. It really is creating a huge amount of pride around the business, and hopefully you can share that with us. And then we are regularly on the conference circuit. Farnborough last year was a huge show. This year we've had Paris Air Show and a conference in the US, and various targeted events around those different sectors. The end of this year is going to be really interesting. We've got Dubai Air Show, a really huge event in the calendar, and COP28, both over in UAE, obviously, and we're going to be there with a significant presence. So those are two big events this year. We have the privilege of meeting, ministers and secretaries of states, and in some cases, the Prime Minister. That's one of our apprentices meeting the Prime Minister this year, and our profile is very high. We are very well liked and respected as a business. People can see what we're trying to do. They do want to support us. As Philip said, we've had some headwind, particularly over the last year, for various reasons, and I'm sure Chris can elaborate on some of that. But we're in a very strong position, arguably the strongest position we've ever been in as a business, and a degree of realism has been dialed into the plans. I think that was necessary, but the opportunities are huge. I mean, multi-billion pound opportunities in any one of those sectors I pointed at, and we have the enabling technology. So if we hold our nerve, continue on this path, then I think you're going to see great things happen in the next 6 to 12 months that are very announceable and very important to you all as shareholders. So I want to thank you sincerely for your support and your patience, and I'm really keen to get into Q&A, but we'll do a quick financial overview before we do so. So I'll pass you over to Chris, and he'll take you through the numbers.
No, brilliant. Thank you, Mark, and thanks for the introduction as well, Philip. For those who don't know me, I'm Chris Thorold. A little bit of background about me. I've spent most of my career in aerospace and technology companies, BAE Systems, Marshall Aerospace, Babcock. Delighted to be here at Reaction Engines at this time, and I think it's a fascinating moment in the company's history. And being able to seize on some of the opportunities that Mark and Philip talked about. So I've got the delight and the pleasure of talking you through the numbers. So I've got some slides on 2022's numbers, which I'll talk about in a sec. A look at 2023 and where we are now, and then a look forward to where we see the company going in the future. So I'll quickly transition into this slide because there's quite a lot of numbers on it. But this is a sort of trailing 5-year view of the company's performance in revenue, profit and cash. It's not deliberately small so you can't see it, is what I would say. But what I would say is, that the first, I've been with the company about 7 or 8 months now, and actually the first thing I've really been trying to focus on doing is really trying to understand, where the company is, where the opportunities are, where the prioritization can be going forward. So whilst there's a story to 2022, I won't dwell on it too much, and we'll talk about 2023. But I think it can really help frame the challenges that we've got. So I'm going to quickly jump away from this slide, although we will share these so you can see them. But just talking about 2022, actually there's 3 main kind of takeaways, I suppose, from the performance in 22. One of which, and the graph in the top right hand corner, if you can see the tiny writing, really illustrates this, which is the move away from space funding and grant funding really towards commercial revenues, whether that be in aerospace and automotive, or whether that be in defence and hypersonics. And actually I think we've really seen and we've really felt that transition as a company. I mean, you can see on the slide on the top right, it's the trailing 5 years of performance. The sort of shaded bar is space funding. The white bars are commercial funding, and we as a company have been having to deal with that change. And that change is, there's a number of things to that. One is very cultural. There's some things around the operating model, but that's what we've been going through in 2022. So the revenue numbers really reflect that. The second point, I suppose, is around our sustainability focus. We've historically called this applied technologies, but this is using that technology in sustainable markets, whether that be aviation, in fuel cells, or decarbonisation technologies, and in energy. And we've seen some green shoots, but to be honest, they've probably not come as quickly as we'd have liked, actually. And when we talk about 2023, we can talk about that a little bit more. The final thing to note actually really is about fundraising, actually, and we're delighted to welcome SDF as an investor who made an investment in the middle of last year. That had its own challenges, regulatory challenges and various approvals to get that in. But what it really does is sets us up for the future. And the graph in the bottom right, which you probably can't see the labelling, is the amount of money that we're investing in sales and marketing and in research and development, self-funded, to be able to try and realise some of those opportunities. And it's quite a significant amount, which really, as a frame, really explains, where we are in 2022 and then on into 2023. So 2023, and here I've brought forward the 2022 numbers so you can see them in a little bit more context. Really pivotal year for the company. I think, in where we've been with space and grant funding and how we're pivoting to real commercial contracts, it's a really pivotal year, and you can see that in the numbers of growth. Key points here really, we signed the HVX contract in February. We've put the value of the contract up there, but that's a really significant contract for us, and I think Mark described that pretty well of how important that is for realising some of the high speed and high speed sort of use cases that we've got in the plan. Record investment, and I just wanted to put the number up here of what we are investing internally as a business in growth. So this number is of 11.8 million is what we're investing in R&D and sales and marketing to the P&L, along with the capex number that's on we invest in the balance sheet. But it's a significant amount, and we're really starting in the sort of second quarter of this year, and hopefully in the second half of this year, we're starting to see some of the fruits of that. But clearly there's a timing impact of that, in that you have to speculate to accumulate, and we that's exactly what we've been doing throughout 2022 and 2023. A bit of a milestone as well. I mean, what we've again historically called applied technologies, but that's us commercialising some of the space technology into other markets. We've already achieved the 2022 number in the first half of 2021 on revenue. So although it's probably not where we want it to be, clearly I'd like it to be higher than that. We're sort of meeting little milestones as we go along pretty well, and doubling revenue kind of year on year. It's a hard game to do organically. So final slide about looking forward. So again, you probably can't quite see the scale on the bottom of this, but this is kind of a trailing 3-year view, 2023 being the fourth column, and then a look forward 5 years. So this is the EBITDA number with the line, and then revenue with the bars. But what we're really trying to achieve going forward is break even EBITDA by the end of 2025. That's a milestone we've kind of been talking about internally, and that's what we're trying to achieve with our business plan. I think we're incredibly well positioned across these markets. I won't talk about them again, but there's some narrative on there just to remind us. But actually, the opportunities are enormous, and really it's about how we can capitalise on those. And as I said, just finally, delivering 2023 is quite critical to that. And if we can do that, and I'm pretty confident we can, we should be very well positioned for future years.
At some point there will be a need for more capital, but it really depends on that crossover between contracts and also how much we want to invest in our own money and the growth opportunity that we see. So it would be to accelerate growth if that would be the reason to do it. Yeah, sure. I think the IPO point was certainly what private company doesn't think about IPOing at some point, but it's certainly not helpful to us to be thinking of that at this point in time. We really need to grow this business as a successful private business, and then revisit that potential at some future point. So it certainly won't be consuming any effort in the near term. We've got to get these numbers to the right place, and we've got to get some significant contracts and make sure we're in a strong position through our partnerships, and then we'd have a basis to look at a number of options, one of which could be an IPO, but it's not a focus of effort at this point in time. Yeah, I think we experienced it truly was a unique set of challenges last year, and we've sort of touched them, but it's probably worth just going over them one more time. One was no other way to say it, but the bottom dropped out of the space funding piece. We came to the end of the Sabre contract. It was a very critical activity for us as a business to have a grant-funded Sabre program, but that was going to come to an end at some point, and there was no natural way to extend that. So we were busily preparing for that scenario and making sure we could build resilience into the business to manage our way beyond that point, which I think we did very successfully. But that drop off in space funding was a significant headwind that we faced. And the other one that Chris touched, just one other one, was we did a successful fundraise last year, a very successful fundraise, but the regulatory approvals process was extensive and extremely long. So those funds actually landed a lot later than anybody planned or budgeted for. And that meant that a lot of what we should have done last year, we've had to do this year effectively, because we just didn't have the capital to do it last year. So we are adrift, but it's absolutely recoverable. And the plan going forward has resilience. It's been reviewed and scrutinised by our financial advisors, who are very credible, been tested in the marketplace, tested through our strategic partners, and by the board, I should say, and subject to us running a few scienarios. I think we are very, very confident we'll hit the numbers.
Can I just
Yeah, sir.
If I could add just a couple of things. I touched on the challenges in UK Space Agency, which from the time when I joined the company, they were offering the opportunity to bid for a significant successor contract to the Sabre contract, and that kept being pushed back and then eventually cancelled. So a lot of the effort of the company 2 years ago was in maintaining that programme with the confidence that we were being told by the funder that they wanted to receive bids to do so, and that didn't happen. And the other thing that has happened, in addition to the delay that Mark mentioned, was that the HVX contract, again, we had anticipated was coming in at least 6 months ahead of when it actually came in. So that is funded work, contracted work which didn't exist for 6 months, which we had expected it would. So if the timing slips, it is a problem, and I can say this as a former government minister reliant on government contracts, because they rarely come in when people think they're going to, including the ministers who are issuing them.
I think just to answer that though, we are now seeing real contracts with real funding coming through, and I think that is perhaps the historic challenge the company's had, that moving away from those grant-funded sort of space contracts, but then into markets which are rapidly evolving and rapidly forming, where investors have got mixed appetites for risk and everything else. But we are really seeing now, and 2023 being that first year, I think, real hard contracts with hard cash on commercial basis, in hypersonics, in aerospace. So, it's really now a case of building upon that.
Yeah, I do want to clarify on the funding point. So what we're saying, just for absolute clarity, is we are not going to go out and attempt a private placement at this point in time. We have other things we need to do in the business ahead of that. So we need to get more contracts, get our partnerships fully up and running, deliver HVX and secure the follow-on. There's various things that are very kind of obvious objectives ahead of going out to the market. But we will get those things done. We will get those things done ahead of being in a position where the company is cash critical. If anyone's worried about that, the plan is a robust plan. But it wouldn't be helpful for us to be distracted by trying to fundraise at this point in time, and it wouldn't be productive either. So I think so. But we are very, very much on top of the financial situation of the business, and particularly the cash position. On valuation, obviously the last fundraise was at £40 a share. So hopefully most people in the room saw and felt some uplift on their investment, and we're continuing with that trajectory. We've had and that was an extension of a fundraise from 2021. So we effectively held that share price. I think we're in a very strong position, subject to us hitting these milestones and delivering these contracts. We'll go out with an elevated share price, and I think that should be good news to everybody when we do push the button on that.
Okay. No, just to add to that, I think we've in that valuation, hitting 2023 and being as close to those numbers on EBITDA, cash generation, etc., is really pivotal to us. That gives us a much better better sort of foundation, I suppose, to go into a next fundraise and start to put some bigger valuations on the company. And that's what we're trying to focus on.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if perhaps a reference point is certainly not the only article, but the Times article on Saturday that talked about hypersonics mentioned at least 2 other companies. There's no doubt. I mean, it's a absolute, as I said myself, strategic imperative. There's billions of dollars and now billions of pounds going into that thematic capability. And there are multiple solutions being developed. So there's no single solution, there's no silver bullet solution to that particular capability or that requirement. So we are really well positioned. So we don't really feel any threat from those other companies. We think it's helpful for the overall ecosystem and moving these projects along. And if you, and actually, by the way, I don't want any of this to sound defensive, because we're all curious about each other's engines and solutions, and we watch each other closely and understand if there's a benefit in partnering on some of these things. But most of them are seeing that the technology solution we've identified is the right way to go, and we are ahead of the pack in that sense. We have developed mature cooling technology, which is critical to those systems. We have a very strong engine partnership with Rolls-Royce, which is important for bringing the rest of the system together. And we now have airframer companies on board with our projects. So a number of those other companies are pursuing, carving their own path, which is absolutely admirable. And in the US is certainly a way to go. But we have a very strong industry and government support around our projects, which is, I think, ultimately going to make a difference between success or failure. So I think at the moment I'd say we're curious about them, we watch closely, and we run all those different scenarios. But the important thing is we're hitting our milestones, we're delivering what the customer expected, and I think we'll get to a very good place, ahead of many of those other companies. And there will be room for a number of us at the end of the day. I think that's helpful as well. This is an emerging, relatively new market space. And there's a handful of players, not dozens of players, and there's certainly no incumbents. There's nobody we're trying to displace. There is nobody out there today that has that capability and is serving that sector. So that's just on the hypersonic side. When it comes to cooling technology, I'll say it now, and we have the world's best cooling technology, without doubt. We have the world's best cooling technology. We are the exemplar. We are held up as the example for others to follow, and try and compete with. Lightest weight, highest performance, most compact, most transformational. So we mustn't ever get complacent about that, and we mustn't lose that edge. But really that's what's given us this opportunity that we see. So and I think it is important to recognise that there will be new people coming along, and we need to watch out for those people. But I think just staying ahead is the important factor.
I'd like to say it's well balanced, in that it provides challenge, but none of those challenges are straightforward. So I wouldn't say it's conservative.
Okay, no, that's fine.
But the key for us is about something that's sort of ambitious but achievable, I think is the right way to pitch it. So the answer is probably maybe. I mean, clearly, what we've created at the moment is a plan that we believe we can kind of organically achieve with the capabilities we have. I mean, I think there are a number of options which are possibly more ambitious, possibly are more acquisitive in nature, that could fast track some of these and speed up some of these things. I mean, clearly the consequences of that are complex on the company and valuation, but we are looking at a whole host of options of, particularly in markets where we've got, a technological advantage or we've got an entry advantage, just how do we capitalise that on that now? Because, time is a critical factor in all of this. I think as somebody mentioned about, the competitive landscape, a lot of these markets are rapidly evolving and rapidly changing. So, every moment we kind of wait, things are happening. So, I think, in short, there are a number of options that we can take, but clearly what we've tried to do though in our core business plan is something that we can achieve with the capabilities we've got, with the people we've got for next year.
Follow up to it.
Thank you. Just to give a slightly different perspective on this, not contradicting what Chris has said, but I think one of the challenges that the company faces is that the breadth of opportunity is enormous. It's not infinite, but it's very significant. And we sometimes get approached to develop something which looks extraordinary. And the temptation in the past, I think, perhaps has been to run with every strand of opportunity that comes in, rather than to focus more laser-like on what are we going to deliver, your words, next year. The answer to next year is quite difficult because it could come from a number of different strands of activity, and our challenge as a board is to focus the executive on the immediate term, and that's not necessarily next year, it's in the next few years, 2 to 3 to 4 years, where some of the opportunities may well go off the chart. But if you asked us to bet on which they would be today, we wouldn't necessarily get it right. I wouldn't like to put money on which of the opportunities is going to be the biggest hockey stick. But I think we are, as Mark was making very clear, we are in an extraordinary place. We've got the hypersonic product, which will be at the core of certainly UK and quite possibly part of a much wider marketplace in hypersonics, and in the whole sort of net zero sustainability area in aerospace and automotive, we are in a remarkably strong position. So both of those are very sexy areas in terms of engineering, aerospace, innovation, and I think that's the challenge, is turning the innovation into cash in the bank.
It's certainly an interesting hypothesis. No, I think the support we get from our technology partners is far and wide. I mean, in terms of I'll give you a couple of examples. So we've secured something like £7.5 million of funding through ATI, the Aerospace Technology Institute, that would not have been accessible to us directly. It was only through our partnership with Rolls-Royce that we were able to access that amount of funding, which has really come at a very important time for the company. So that's a very helpful form of assistance, and we've got multiple other areas of engagement with Rolls-Royce. We are working very closely with Boeing in the US. So our first big contract in the US has come from Boeing, so that's another thing to be not just grateful for, but we anticipated and now have actually landed, so that's great. And then here in the UK, the uptick, let me just say, the uptick in defence and being partnered with BAE Systems puts us in a very good position. So active exploration of all of those things. It's been a topic of the board meeting discussions today, how we maximise those opportunities with our, as you say, strategic or technology partners, whilst also, as they all understand and we understand, preserving the freedom to operate elsewhere. Most of those people I mentioned are not involved in HVX. One is Rolls-Royce, but we have the ability to still be independent when we need to be. But I think it is a very symbiotic relationship. I think just both sides recognise we do need to and probably can do more together, and that's going to be a focus over the next few months. Yeah, I think by the way, I can understand how that may be a perception, but I think around the board table there is a great sense of alignment. I think there's a very deep and understanding of the shareholding base and what we need to do to be successful as a business and deliver a return to shareholders, and we're working hard to achieve both of those things, and they do go hand in hand. I can only go back to, if we land these contracts that are revenue generating and long term, everybody wins. There's no doubt everybody will be a winner from that. So I think my mic's just died, but it's more there's more synergy than there may appear to be when you think, we're working on these R&D activities, we've been, asking people to be patient. But we really actually talk about the next 6 to 12 months. I mean, that is the thing that's going to make the difference. And that might be a jam tomorrow statement, but there's evidence and hopefully proof points out there and around us. We do now have a catalogue of products. We do now have contracts that are either fully funded or part funded. We have seed opportunities for very large pieces of work that will take us not just out the next few years, but potentially the next couple of decades. And we have an opportunity to go explore an entirely new part of the world for us in terms of the UAE. We're probably the best placed strategic investor in that nation. So in a year where they're hosting COP28, so there's a lot to like about the next 6 months that could make a significant difference to how financial institutions and perhaps private shareholders are feeling about the business, and that you've been coming to 13 years worth of meetings and still not had that return, but it is coming. It's definitely coming. And I where I started with that, the alignment around the board's table is very strong.
I think it is worth just adding that the strategic shareholders that we have are massive enablers in order to achieve the milestones that we need to demonstrate that we have a product portfolio that has huge potential and will generate not just revenue but profit, which will justify not only the latest valuation but future valuation. So I think it is a symbiotic relationship at the moment, and I don't feel, having come to this relatively recently, that certainly much more recently than the 13-year-long shareholders that we've got in the room, that the strategics are doing anything to suppress the company's ability to grow. Far from it.
I think that was on our checklist to mention, and we failed to mention it, so let's mention it. Some of the technology plays will be around licensing arrangements with technology partners or manufacturing partners that can take this to market in a more rapid and scalable way. So that is absolutely in our minds and in our plans for a particular subset of the technology solutions. And I've mentioned Rolls-Royce a few times, but let me just remind people why we did that. It was for access to market. I mean, that was the reason for partnering with Rolls-Royce. We want our technology in their engines out with their installed customer base, and then next generation engines that are going to serve future customers. So that was the key reason for that deal, and we anticipate doing other deals like that with a licensing sort of strategy, but also potentially spinning out businesses, as we've done with Sunborn Systems, which we also haven't mentioned today. Our joint venture to explore clean fuels for the maritime and aviation sector using ammonia and our technology. In itself, it's a really exciting business that has huge potential, but as a test case for how you spin out from reaction engines, it's also serving a very useful purpose.